Hi guys, my name is Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. I haven't done much to have a drink, nor have I since January 25th, 1981. It's a great pleasure to be here. As you can see now, this is the third session, right? We're calling these sessions. Not even taught. It's third session. I'm not even putting titles on these because nobody has any idea what I'm doing. Okay. So theoretically, if we were actually at the step series, this would be on the third step. Some of you think since I have the big book open, you're thinking there's a possibility, there's a hope in your heart that I might talk about the third step. And then there's the other people that actually know me. It might be in there. It might be in there somewhere. You might have to dig for it. Why should I do all the work? Why should I do all the work? I mean, we got people here that have 30 years. We got people that got 1 year. We got people that 6 months. We got people that got 10 years. Why should I have to do all the work on the... Why don't I just be honest with you and tell you a little bit about my story? Why don't I do what the big book says? You know, I have this theory that there is a God, he exists, I love him, and I know who he is. And what I do is before I come here, before I speak, I just ask him to take over. I just ask God to take over and show up. And, you know, just whatever comes out of my mouth, let it be whatever you want to come out of my mouth. And whatever you hear may not be the same thing as the person sitting next to you. It's going to depend upon your experience. So some guy in the back of the room thinks he hears me say something, and somehow, some way, it's sort of some sort of little nuclear explosion goes off and he thinks I'm talking about step 7. And somebody else, something happens, they think I'm talking about step 12. It hit, and it's going all over the place, and you don't even remember the whole talk. I don't remember the whole talk. You remember like one line. And the line you remember may not even be something that I was even thinking about. So why am I going to force it? I'll just do what they tell me to do in the book. They say each alcoholic, in his own language, and from his own point of view, talks about how he developed his relationship with God. That, I think, would sort of cover it. I think that would sort of cover the waterfront, don't you think? Probably cover step 3. For some of you guys, it probably covers step 6. Some people, and for some of you guys, it'll cover step 14 and 15. Other people will just get all pissed off because they'll think I'm destroying Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. So in any event, so let's just see where this thing goes. I want to read something out of the big book. Okay? Just whatever. I'm just going to read this thing. This was, I'm like really big on the, on Founders AA. What I call this Founders AA. You know, I don't have anything against the traditions. Is there a child being kidnapped or something? Is that it?
Ignore the Amber Alert.
It's okay. I thought the Amber Alert was because I was talking. I wonder if they ever catch people with that. You know, it'd be great if they do. No, in any event, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, my testimony. It's not your story, it's my story. And it's going to be different. It's going to be different because this is the first time I've ever told this story. Ever. You know how I know that? Because, what's today's date?
25th of September.
It's the 25th of September. And so this is the story I'm telling on the 25th of September.
2025.
I couldn't tell this story on the 24th. And I couldn't tell this story 5 years ago. And the story was different 20 years ago. The story was different when I had 3 years. Because I'm not the same person I was a week ago. I'm not the same person. I could not have told this story a week ago. As a matter of fact, a week ago I was here, I'm sure whatever story I told you was about me, and it was probably about God. And I'm sure it was a different story. Not necessarily a bad story, good. I'm sure it was a different story. But I think the way this thing works is as you grow and as you evolve and as you get repeated humiliations and the crushing of your self-sufficiency, I think it changes your perspective. So my perspective tonight on what actually happened to me in this deal, how I got to the point where I'm at right now, which may have something to do with God in the third step, or the 11th step, or the 7th step, or the 6th step, or the 12th step, or all the steps. They all have something to do with humility or something. That's what it says in the 7th step. You know, so it's going to be different than anything I've ever spoken about before. Because on the way up here, even though I don't plan, I was sort of thinking about my life, you know. And I got out of bed 2 weeks ago, and I had this happen to me 2 years before this. About a year before this, I had. You remember when you were drinking? You ever lie down in the bed and the bed's spinning? You remember the bed spinning? Anybody have that bed spinning, Neil? And you put your foot down. So about a year and a half ago or something like that, I got up and I had vertigo. I'm 76 years old. It's over. It's over for me. So I got up and I had vertigo. I don't know how many people have ever had vertigo. For some people, as they get older, they get that stuff, you know. And it's a scary thing when you get up and you fall down, you crash into a wall, or you fall down because you can't stand. You can't, unless you've been there. And don't worry, I have some great news for you. There is some shit going to happen to you. It's going to be exciting. I'm telling you, it's going to be exciting. You think the world is crazy. You think that you got to battle all this stuff. You have no idea what's about to happen to you guys. You know, you put on a few years, there's going to be good stuff. You're going to go through 6 weeks of radiation therapy. There's going to be some good deals going on. And I mean that. I'm not being sarcastic. It's going to be good for you. Well, it's going to be good for some of you. It's going to be good for believers. It's not going to be good for non-believers. Just trust me on that. You know, I've seen a lot. And, there's that commercial, that insurance commercial. He says, we know a lot because we've seen a lot. I've seen a lot. I've seen them die as believers. I've seen them die as non-believers. I know what the deal is. So, but I want to tell you, so I woke up about a week ago and I got that deal again. I'm crashing in. I can't stand. I can't walk. I have no balance. So I said, came back to visit me again. Here it is again, you know, and then, but what happened was the next day it got a little bit better, and then it got a little better, but then sort of he's like hanging around. Not so bad, you know, it's just every once in a while I do well, I can walk, but every once in a while I just fall into a wall or something, you know. It's hard to explain unless you've been there. And it's not a bad deal, you know, as deals go, you know. And I happen to enjoy it in a weird way. And I'll tell you why I enjoy it, which some of you will understand. See, I have, in the 6th step, one of the things it says that happens to you is you will do anything. You will do anything and get rid of anything so that you can somehow grow in the image and likeness of your Creator. That's what it's all about. It's a well-loved clergyman in AA thought that up. You know, he said, the thing that separates the men from the boys and the women from the girlies, separates out the adults, is the adults finally get to a point in their life where the great fact means something. That's the rocket ship ride, where you're rocketing in the fourth dimension of existence. It's not just not drinking. I ain't putting down not drinking, but it's not just not drinking. And it's being rocketed into some sort of fourth dimension of existence, whatever that is. Knowing heaven and knowing peace. Peace and vertigo. Peace and cancer. Peace and cancer. What good is peace if cancer would interrupt it? What's so big deal about peace if being low on money interrupts it? I'm not the peace beyond all understanding where it doesn't have anything to do with my circumstances. You see, if you're an alcoholic and you're in AA, maybe for a few years or 3 or 4 or 10 years or whatever you're in AA, you know that even though you're not drinking and you have periods where you feel good, you also know about the 3 o'clock in the morning when you're scared crapless. You also know about the anxiety that goes along with sobriety. I'm talking about which goes along with physical sobriety. When you're dealing with life and you're wrestling with the world and you're scared and you don't know what you're going to do and you're overwhelmed with fear or you're lonely or you don't know where to turn or anything like that, but you're not drinking and you're going to meetings. And you go to meetings just to not only not drink, but just to survive. You go and he says, I needed this meeting. You don't need this meeting necessarily because you're going to drink, although that's a possibility. You need something besides cocaine, marijuana, a drug. You need something so that you won't blow your brains out. And that's, for some people, for many, many years, that's sobriety. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's a thing. I had a guy call me up. I get a lot of people that call me up. They call me up. He called me up with a problem. And he told me the problem. He's got 7 years. He has a problem. He told me the problem. I recognized the problem. He was very distressed about the problem, about the difficulty that he's going through. And the reason I know about the problem is because I had the problem. I had it for years. And I know, and I've been called by hundreds of men over the last 45 years who had the same problem. But it was a big deal. Sometimes when you have a problem, it's a big deal. And so he told me about the problem. And then he shared it with me. I said, so what's the problem? He said, well, what do you mean, what's the problem? And I said, well, yeah, I have that problem. I've had 1,000, 2,000 men have called me up with that problem. I understand about the problem. So what's the problem? Oh, you thought you're the only one who had that problem. You thought there's something wrong with you. And he says, no, that's what happens at 7 years. That's a 7-year problem. But I want to let you know, one day it's going to go away, about 20 or 25 years, and you're not going to have it anymore. But you'll be struggling with that problem like the Apostle Paul was struggling with his problem, called the thorn in his flesh. He had a problem. We don't know that the Apostle Paul is, for those people that like their saints perfect, like him perfect, they think it's that he was nearsighted. The Apostle Paul said his problem was a gift from Satan. It was satanic. I don't think it had anything to do with being nearsighted. I think it was something else. You know what I mean? I think it had something to do with our kind of deal. That's why he said, the Apostle Paul said things like, I do the things I don't want to do, or I do the things I want to do, I don't do. What a wretched man am I. Apparently, the Apostle Paul sometimes thought badly about himself. He'd say, I'm such a jerk. But he said it differently. What a wretched man am I. Who's going to save me? You know what I mean? So the truth of the matter is, if you're going to be sober and not drink in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to go through times in your life where you're going to see some serious warts and blemishes that will not go away. That will not go away. And you're going to panic. And you're going to think, some of you that are more religiously inclined are going to think, I'm not going to go to heaven. I'm a bad, but you're going to beat the crap out of yourself, and that's not true. Because nobody in heaven is, if you don't get into heaven unless you're perfect, it's going to be a lot of empty space up there. I can tell you that right now. Empty space, okay? And because that has nothing to do, in my theology, you got to understand about my theology, that has nothing to do with being good. It's nice to be good. So in any event, so when I read the big book at this stage in my life, and it's been this way for many years, when I think of the 6th step now, I got to be honestly, I was doing step series when I was 5 years sober. From 5 years sober up to, I've been doing step series all over the place and, speaking and doing conventions, stuff like that. I can be honest with you and say, and I take a book and I'd underline them, I did them, and I think people liked it and everything like that. And I had no idea what the step six. When I was doing step six, I had no idea what that was about. I had no idea what step seven. I mean, of course I had an idea, but I really didn't. I didn't know it like I know it now. You understand what I'm saying? I didn't know step 7 and step 6 and what it was about the way I know it now. Now, if God should allow me to live another 10 years, I'll probably be saying, I didn't know it back then, 10 years ago, when I said the way I know it, because you grow and you change and you see things, and sometimes you'll see a sentence. What is that line? A man can see something or hear something 999 times and hear it for the 1,000th time and hear it for the first time. And sometimes you open up a big book at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're 20 years sober and you're going through something and you start reading something, and all of a sudden you see one line. You say, wow. And you must have read it 1,000 times, and it changes your whole life. And so that's sort of like the way it is for me. I see things now that I never saw before. And so I 30 years ago, I was walking into the Carl Gables room. I remember it like it was yesterday. There's some things you remember like it was yesterday. And there was a kid standing outside. I was going to do a step series. I was doing a step series. And I was going to the room to do a step series. I walked there, and this kid was sitting there, and he said, "Are you Russell?" I said, "Yes, I'm Russell." He says, "My sponsor says you're a good speaker. I ought to listen to it." I said, "Oh, that's nice." He says, you talk too much about God. And, well, you should see me now. It's gotten much worse. So apparently it was pretty bad back then. It was pretty damn bad back then. But it's like off the charts now. But the only reason it's off the charts now is because I've been intensely hanging out with him more for 45 years. I've been intensely relying on him more for 45 years. He is the central fact of my life for 30 years. I am convinced that he lives in my heart and mind in a way which is indeed miraculous, allowing me to do things that I could never do for myself. So, of course, I talk about it. What would you expect? Well, if that, oh, by the way, that's not an original thing for me. That's where you're supposed to be if you're doing the program of recovery. Those are quotes straight out of the big book. He says, well, you got your program and I got my program. There's only one program. The program is you end up making God the central fact of your life, that we have no power. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures avail us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We give up all our old ideas. Whatever we think, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. We reject the ideas of atheism. We reject the ideas. These things must be abandoned. And we abandon ourselves to God. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. We totally rely on God. Not necessarily on people, but on God. That's what it says in the last page, when it finally sums up. Well, we won't know you. It doesn't matter when you know us. Your real reliance has to be on God. He'll show you how to create the fellowship you crave. And if you have all that stuff going for you, what kind of fellowship do you think you'll crave? You got to see that your relationship with God is right, and great events will happen to you. And you'll meet some of us in the fellowship of the Spirit, whatever that is. If you guys knew what that was at 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, whatever it is, all these things they're saying get muddled up, like Bill Wilson. He said, you know what he said? He said, the first thing he said is after he saw the light and the whole thing, the room lit up, and so this is the God of the prophets. And then he said that deal about the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease. I got to keep talking about him and telling other people. And then he said, but I wanted God so much, and he came, but soon his presence was blotted out. Bill Wilson, blotted out. by worldly glamours most of the time. It's been that way ever since, up until I was 23 years sober. And then I started using LSD, and then I almost went down the tubes. And then finally I came to some sort of epiphany saying it's all in the prayer of St. Francis. And he wrote an essay on it, Emotional Sobriety, the Next Frontier, and saying these people, I see old timers and they're dying like me. That's what he said. I'm talking about Bill Wilson. And I've seen thousands of people drink, commit suicide, be miserable, even with 20 years and 25 years. I've seen it in AA. I've seen it. And I've seen miracles in AA where people just sort of like all of a sudden they do what Bill, they sort of come out of it. It's almost like they're working a different program. We do meetings, I call them beginners meetings for old timers. Because if you can't get past the don't drink and go to meetings deal, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up in a place where you're going to be doing everything by rote over and over again. You're going to wind up like a hamster on a wheel. And you're going to somehow at 3 o'clock in the morning say to yourself, you're going to have that medallion, and you know something, you're going to be either bored or miserable or trying to figure out, is that all there is? Like the song. That's what I've seen. And that's what happened to me at 10 years. And that's what happened to many people. And I've seen a lot of people drink. So this is what I talk about. And so I want to read this one part, and then I want to talk a little bit about my story that may have something to do with step 3 or step 6 or step 7 or step 11, step 13, 14, or 15. Don't worry about the traditions. They'll be okay. They'll be okay. Those guys that met when Bill Wilson had 15 years sobriety, they all had. You guys ever been to a business meeting? So they had a business meeting. Bill Wilson had 15 years. This is a few years before he started taking the LSD. Everybody else had less than 15 years. And they came up with these traditions. And they're good. I'm not saying they're bad. You know what I mean? But at 21 years, at 21 years and 22 years, when he was going down tubes, he had a whole different idea of what this thing was all about. And Dr. Bob knew it because he went up to Bill. Dr. Bob was the closest thing to Bill. They were not only friends, it was almost like they sponsored each other. He went up to Bill, he said, Bill, the last words he said to him, let's not screw this thing up, let's keep it simple. But Dr. Bob saw this. There's more, let me do it this way. Believe it or not, there's more out there for you than AA. Don't stop at AA. I mean, I love AA. I'm a card-carrying member of AA. I qualify for AA. But my AA it's kind of different, as you can tell. It's more like the AA they were doing back in 1936 to 35. When the books they used between 35 and 39 was the Holy Bible, and the ones they found absolutely essential were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. That's because that's what's in our literature. Did you know that's in our literature? Did you know that the first AA meeting was done by Dr. Bob? And what he did was he read Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Did you know that? And nobody walked out of the room? And nobody said that's a violation of the traditions? Did you know that? There's a great line by T.S. Eliot. He said, we will not cease our searching. We'll keep on exploring, but at the end of our searching, we'll come back to the place where we began, having known the place for the first time. You'll run all over the planet trying to figure out what the hell's wrong with you. Why are you acting this way? Why are you crazy? You're going to meetings. What is happening? What is this all about? What's it all about out there? You'll run all over the planet. And in the end, if you're sober, after having the crap beat out of you, you will come to maybe 45 years, maybe 40 years, maybe 30, having known the place for the first time. And all of a sudden, you'll start reading stuff in the big book, and it'll mean something completely different to you. And what will be completely different to you is that you'll be reading stuff and it'll be all about God. And you'll sort of figure this thing out. You'll like Dr. Bob's nightmare. If you're an atheist, agnostic, have some sort of spiritual pride that keeps you from what we're trying to tell you, I feel sorry for you. Your Heavenly Father will never let you down. Oh, I think he was serious. Maybe that's what this thing is all about. An abiding conviction in God. God either is or he isn't. What's your decision going to be? Maybe that's what this is all about. I know it's all about the fourth step, right? Do the great fourth step. Do the great fifth step. Vent. Tell people what your problems are. Share. Help other people and everything. It's all right, all good. Keep you sober. Intensive work with alcoholics. But maybe after all those steps, maybe there is something else out there that you really need to have. We'll call it the secret ingredient. That's all over and infused in the big book, but nobody seems to get it because whenever they start to get it in an A room, somebody hits them over the head and says, don't talk about that shit. It's like the bucket of crabs, where, if you ever go crabbing, I don't go crabbing, but this is one of my A friends. He says, you go crabbing, you throw a crab into a bucket, and the crab will try to crawl out of the bucket. But if you want to keep the crab in the bucket, you get another crab and you throw it in the bucket with it. Because as soon as the first crab tries to crawl out, the second crab will latch onto him and pull him back down. And so that's AA. As soon as you try to crawl out, start thinking about the God thing and say, whoa, you're going to kill newcomers? So, in any event, I don't even know what all that now. I don't know. So let me read this one thing to you. So this is on page 42. This is Fred. This is 1935, 36 guys. Here it is. It says, 2 of our members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like as much, and then asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I was really licked this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. The process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. And then it says this. Then, you might want to be interested in this. You should be interested in this because this has to do with your life. This has to do with your life. So you might want to be interested in this, okay? Then they outline the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them have followed successfully. Would you like to know about that? Would you like to know about the program of action, which 100 of them followed successfully? Yeah, this might have to do with you. Though I had been only a nominal churchman. Why would you say that? Such bringing this year? Although because it had something to do with that. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But, now here's the deal I want to point out to you, then I'm closing the book. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. Was pretty drastic. So what do you think that meant? What do you think a drastic program looks like? Well, let's put it this way. Between 1935 and 1939, the only way you could go to AA meeting is if you walked in and in front of everybody who was already in AA, you had to get down on your knees and give your life to God. Do you guys think that's drastic? That's pretty drastic. It's not like picking up a white chip. It's not like saying, anybody want to pick up a white chip? It's not like, you had to get down on your knees before the meeting. They wouldn't even let you in and give your life to God. It's not like picking up a white chip, is it? It's not like some guy saying, anybody want to give a white chip? Oh, well, if you're shy, I'll put it out over here. And it's not like that, right? It's like, you didn't have to do that to get in here, did you? That's pretty drastic stuff. You know what I mean? Now listen, there was a way you could avoid doing that if you did it by the hospital bed, you know, because they'd have you in the hospital for like a week or two. If you got down on your knees, like the guy from Cleveland, Clarence, the brewmaster, when Dr. Bob came to, he said, first question was, do you believe in God? He says, well, what does that have to do with it? He says, everything. He says, well, I guess I do. I says, guess nothing. Guess nothing. You either believe or you don't believe. Well, I do. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, get out of bed and get on your knees. We're going to pray. He says, I don't know how to pray. I guess you don't, but that's okay. Just follow along with me. I'll tell you what to say. And he got down on his knees and he did what I guess you would call the third step. What we call the third step. This is before the first meeting. They had you doing this before they were serious. They called it the surrender. And you know what Clarence said? I love this statement by Clarence. He said, I did what I was ordered to do. There were no suggestions. Now, if we did that today, if AA was that today, okay, this room would have 10 or 15 people in it. 10 or 15 people. But the conversation would be entirely different than the AA meeting. It would be a completely different conversation, a completely different focus, and the only thing you'd be talking about is God. And nobody would be standing up saying, well, if they did that when I came in, I would have left. And no, you wouldn't have even been in. So I just tell you, like, after 45, I'm like sort of like, I'm not like, when you say, well, it violates traditions, well, I mean, or it's not conference approved. There's no book that's conference disapproved. The books that are conference approved are published by AA. They make money on them. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, you know, and it's uniform. It's like McDonald's. It's like McDonald's. A's like McDonald's. You understand what I'm saying? Wherever you go, you're going to get the same Happy Meal. You know what I mean? Which is okay. Many people are sober today because it's like McDonald's. You understand what I'm saying? The only problem is there's many old timers that are drunk today and unhappy today because it's like McDonald's. I mean, you can only eat McDonald's so much. You got to somehow get drastic. So, in any event, so I did the third step, right? How do you do it? You get down on your knees, you know. Well, I did the other way they said it with another person, and I did that. But the way I did it was I locked the door. I told you guys, I got down on my knees. I said the prayer, you know, and you know, whether I believed it or I didn't believe it, I think it's about as sincere as here's the deal. I never remember thinking about God, talking about God, worrying about God when I was hanging around the Alibi Lounge looking at the score. You know what I mean? God had absolutely nothing to do in my life prior to 31 years of age. After 31 years of age, I came to AA. My sponsor gave me a 24-hour book, said I want you to read it every day, get down on your knees, and ask God's help to stay sober. I have no idea what I thought God was, who he was, or what he wasn't, or anything like that. So I ain't putting down necessarily, you know, this is how I was raised. I think they talked a little bit more about God 40 years ago, but I mean, I may be wrong. Who knows? I can barely remember stuff. But the point is that's what was done for me from the beginning. The sponsor I wanted what he had. And what he had, of course, was sobriety. From the beginning, first thing he said to me is, here's a 24-hour book. If you know anything about a 24-hour book, what it is, it's a combination of statements from the big book and from the Holy Bible. And that's what I used for many, many years. And that's what he used. And so whether you like it or not, or don't like it, the vestiges of the Founders AA went on at least up until 1980 because he was handing me the 24-hour book. Then we got daily reflections. And the Bible was gone. and the Bible is gone because daily, and they stopped selling the 24-hour book in the meetings. Why don't you sell it? It's been used for 30 years because it's not conference approved. Because it's not conference approved. The Bible's not conference approved. It's just not conference approved. So all the old timers, all the guys in the 1930s, they did it all wrong. We improved on what they were doing. I know it says, really, I've seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path, but we improved their path by getting rid of the God stuff because we didn't want to hurt any newcomers, and therefore we consigned them to death because he walked away from the program. At least that's my opinion. That's my opinion. So you could say, well, this guy's full of shit. That's okay. Doesn't bother me. Okay, so I got down on my knees. I said the third step prayer. And the book says, once you say that, one time, it says, we have now done the third step. So that's it. You say the third step prayer one time. Now you're done with the third step. And then you get to worry about money, property, prestige, and romance for the next 25 years. But the thing is, I had a sponsor because I do believe that the fellowship you hang out with and the people you hang out with will determine where you're going to be in the next 5 years. It's also the people you hang out with and the books you read, and the books you read will depend upon who you hang out with. And my sponsor used the 24-hour book. So I used the 24-hour book. And my sponsor said, get down on your knees. So I got down on my knees. So I said every day. And my sponsor was into that deal. And so I got into that deal. And the people he hung around was into that deal. Not even so much about the Bible, but about books that talked about spiritual things and included the word, the Bible in there. So that's how I was raised. And then my sponsor died, and I got another sponsor who was like my sponsor, but even more into the God thing. You understand what I'm saying? More into God. More into, if you had a conversation with my sponsor about anything, it would wind up with God. It would wind up either praying to him or getting down on your knees, or what does this have to do with God? Or, and it would wind up with the God thing. Now, by that time, there's a little bit of a problem. Now, I'm running into a little bit of a problem because I'm not really a God guy or anything like that. 5 years or 6, whatever it is. I'm wrestling with the frickin' world. I'm the money. Listen, God is nice, but I'm talking money. It's not important. It's just right up there with oxygen. You know what I mean? And, you go to these people, these old timers, and you say, well, what's your problem? I said, I don't have any money. I'm broke. I'm raising 4 kids. I don't have any money. He says, so let me get this straight. Would this problem be solved with money? I said, well, yeah, duh. Yeah. He says, well, if your problem would solve with money, then it's not really a problem, is it? I said, what? I said, well, a problem is when you have a 5-year-old child that's dying of cancer and money won't solve it, right? He said, yeah. A problem is what about a problem that money can't solve? A life or death problem, or something that, somebody's dying in your family. What about that? What about that? Those are problems. Money comes and money goes, you know what I mean? And you run into these people and it's usually the God people, because somehow they weather the storm and they get through this. So what happens is, now I got a real problem because they're telling me to pray all the time, and they're telling me to read the Bible, and they're telling me to read other stuff and doing this stuff. And here's the problem I have. It's working. It's working. Now, it's working poorly. When I say poorly, I still have anxiety. It's not like perfect, because the way I do it is I'm doing half measures. In other words, I surrender. I do the surrender. That's what they call the surrender. I surrender I throw in the towel, and then I grab it back, and I rip off strips, and I hope that will satisfy him. You know what I mean? It's like, it says, oh yeah, it's all God, and then I start thinking about the money again. Oh yeah, it's all God, and then I'm starting thinking, yeah, but what if this happens, and what if that happens? I haven't really abandoned myself to God. I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it in a drastic fashion because I still have that other problem. I have that fear of people and economic insecurity. That hasn't gone away, which is supposed to go. It's supposed to go away. I got 9 years, I got 10 years. How come it hasn't gone away? And I didn't know there was a linkage that is the kind of stuff that goes away when you abandon yourself to God and you surrender. See, I didn't know there was a linkage. I thought if I just do the steps, I do a good step 4, a good step 5, and a good step 10, and I just help other people, I'll never be worried about money anymore. If I just do the step 4, step 5, step 6, step 7, I won't worry about what people think about me. But I don't know about you, but it didn't work that way with me. It didn't work that way with me. I didn't know there was a connection between surrendering yourself to God and joining the fellowship of the Spirit and being all in and being totally free of worrying about what people thought about you. Nobody ever explained it to me, or if they did, I didn't hear it. And so how can I surrender myself to God and talk about God at meetings like I'm talking to you about it right now? How can I do that in a meeting if I'm worried about if I do it, you won't like me? And how does that filter into my life? If I can't talk about God in a meeting where God is all over the book, if I can't talk about him in a meeting, what does that mean? What am I like outside as far as worrying about what people think about me, worrying about what my boss thinks about me, worrying about what the girl or the guy thinks about me, worried about what the world thinks about me? Is that freedom or is that alcoholism? Is that fear, which is the corrosive thread? Is that the way I want to live my life? Not drinking, but being scared crapless of what you might think about me or what you're going to think about me or what are they going to think about me? If my house is foreclosed on or if things happen or whatever, because life gets lifey. You know what I mean? And you can't talk about God because they'll tell you to leave the meeting or something, and they probably won't, but you think they will. You understand what I'm saying? Nobody can talk about God. Listen, I got news for you. I do conventions. I talk about this stuff. They have tapes of mine. They say, would you come do our convention? I said, have you listened to my tapes? I'll send you. He says, oh yeah, we want you. I don't know. Apparently, you can talk about God in AA, and some people not only like it, they want it. I know you find that hard to believe. It's true. But it has something to do with fear. But there's a connection. I don't know. It's the secret ingredient that gets you past all the bullshit. You understand? It's what they were doing in 1935, 36, 37, 38, 39. So in any event, now all of a sudden, I crash and burn. This is what happened in my life. I crash and burn in 10 years. I don't drink. I do the Bill Wilson thing. I do the Bill Wilson thing where I get depressed. I get very depressed. I'm still going to meetings. I'm depressed and going to meetings. I'm depressed and doing step series. I'm not feeling good. There's something missing. And every meeting I go to, it's the same thing. And I finally go to some guy and I tell him what's going on. He says, some Russell, you're doing everything. I get what you're doing, all the stuff you're doing. I says, why don't you start going to Bible study and studying the source material? I explained to him what any good AA would explain. I explained to him that I'm spiritual, not religious, because everybody knows that if you're a good AA, you are spiritual. You evolve to some sort of angelic creature, like a spiritual creature, just because you are who you are and you're not religious. So all these guys from 1935 to 1945, they're all full of shit. The guys that were reading the Bible, the guys that were going to church. That part of the book when they say we encourage, joining the church and all that sort of stuff. You'll be a minute, you'll be good. All that stuff where they encourage you to do that stuff. When you asked Dr. Bob, what does first things first mean? And he said, seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all things be. He was full of crap. Dr. Bob didn't know what he was talking about. All those old timers, when they started this thing, they're full of crap because they all went to church. They all came out of the hospital. They all did. Oh, there was that one guy, the atheist, who talked them into God, as you understand. I get that. The guy who drank. Henry Parkhurst, the guy who drank. But Bill Wilson was still an alcoholic, just like you and me, and I get it. He didn't want to piss anybody off, so they compromised. I understand that deal. That's a slippery slope. But in any event, the bottom line is, so I told him, I said, I'm spiritual, not religious. We don't do that in AA. Where did I get the idea that we don't do that in AA? And you wanted something? You do that in AA. But even if we don't do it in AA, maybe you should do it. Maybe there's something even bigger than AA, because I have news for you, the trustees are not the God of my understanding, neither is Bill Wilson. Because the God of my understanding has all power, and I don't think the trustees do, and I don't think Bill Wilson does, and I certainly don't. You know, that kind of thing. So I find myself going to church and meeting people that have the same problems we have, the same difficulties we have, but there's only one difference. All they do is talk about God and give them their lives to God. And you know what happens? I wanted what they had, which to me is the 13th step. Getting to the point where you have somebody in front of you that has something more than you have, and you want what they have, so you follow them. And those people, you can find them in AA. You can find them outside of AA and everything like that. I only got about 3 minutes, and I can wrap this thing up. And then you start doing the 6th step, and you hang around these people. God is not a dirty word, and you actually see the 6th step, and the 6th step says that the men and women who are doing the 6th step, are men and women who are trying repeatedly to grow in the image and likeness of their Creator, and you're trying to do that, but now you have an idea of who your Creator is. You understand what I'm saying? Because you're hanging around people, and they're not lost, and they're not confused, and they know exactly who their Creator is, and they understand that the way their Creator works is that when you're weak, He's strong. And then all of a sudden I realized that the times I've been the closest to God in AA has been when I had cancer, when I was down on my knees and asked Him to come in my life because I couldn't stop drinking. The time when I was closest to God was when I was at my lowest points in my life. And the times I steered away from Him and He wasn't part of my life was when I was going gangbusters and doing good. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden my entire world changes in the way I look at myself and things. That's not about the money, property, and prestige. It's not about all that stuff I worshiped, that I really worshiped that stuff. It was about focusing on God. And so I got vertigo, and I'm saying, oh, thank you, God, this is pretty good. It's great. You know, this isn't such a bad deal, really. When your bodily functions go and everything like that, it's, and I just do what I always do. I say, thank you, Lord. And, you know, I don't know and it works. I don't sit around and worry about it. I do what I have to do. I go to the doctor. I go physical therapy. I do that stuff. And it's not that you don't have problems. You have problems. We all have problems. The problems never stop. The hits keep on coming. But the difference is the problems do not stop your ability for feeling grateful, and you don't have anxiety. They're not. It just doesn't matter. You end up doing the right thing. You feel, how you feel about yourself has nothing to do with the circumstances of your life. I know that's hard to believe, you know? You got money in the bank, you feel good. You don't have money, you feel bad. Hard to believe that you can live a life where you're the same all the time, no matter what your circumstances are. Married, not married, people mad at you, not mad at you, job, no job. What do they say? Job, no job. Wife, no wife. We cry for this stuff. That's what alcoholics do. Let him know that he can get better and get weller. It doesn't matter about that stuff as long as he trusts God and cleans house, right? And all of a sudden you start seeing what the big book is really about. Is it about the steps? Yeah, it's about the steps. But that's not what it's real. What it's really about is if you get to 20 years or 30 years and you're an ace at doing the steps, but you don't have God, you're going to have it's a sad situation, you know? when cancer comes along or that stuff comes along, when things happen in your life. And you can't be relied upon, and that's the deal. So what was that? So to me, the 13th, what's the 14th step? To me, the 14th step is making God the central factor of your life. Have you ever read that in a big book? God must become, that's the great fact. He must become the central factor of your life. That's not the 3rd step. That's not even the 11th step. The 11th step is improving your conscious contact by doing whatever you got to do, hang around the people and everything so you improve your conscious. But I'll tell you what, that 14th step, making him the central factor of your life, where you think about him all the time, you talk about him all the time, you go to meetings, you're not worried about it. That's about the time when you start talking about what's going on in your life and you don't worry about what everybody else is thinking about. And what's the 15th step? Well, they say it in the big book, didn't you see it? It says you become convinced, without doubt. You're convinced that everything that's happening to you, that God lives inside of you, allowing you to do things you could never do by yourself, and he's real. Whoa. What would happen if you lived a life like that? Not just the first 12, but you actually went on after, is that AA? Well, I personally think it is AA. I believe it's AA. It may not be your AA, it's my AA. Because I believe that AA is actually what they were doing between 1935 and 1950 or whatever it is. That AA is what they were actually doing. But you may not realize that. There's a lot of people that don't realize that because nobody talks about it, right? But it's actually, there's not one thing I've said to you tonight, or I've quoted you tonight, that didn't come right out of our AA conference-approved literature. It's just a different way of looking at it. Just more steps. So what is that? So what was that? Was that a 3rd step meeting?
Not really.
Was that a 6th step meeting?
Yeah, okay.
Was that an 11th step meeting? Was that a 7th step meeting?
It's a Russell
Well,
Spatz meeting.
that was just a meeting. Was that a 15th step meeting?
Is it a
What was
Russell
that?
Spatz meeting?
I don't know. Some sort of meeting. Okay, thank you.